The moment Avery Cole realized someone had slipped a tracking device into her briefcase, she knew her audit had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She stood frozen in Luca Moretti's marble lobby, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach, to the 5-month secret hidden beneath her carefully tailored blazer. The numbers didn't lie. His empire was built on blood money, but the men watching her now weren't his. They were rivals, and they wanted what she knew. The question wasn't whether she'd survive the night. It was whether they would. If you love dramatic crime romance, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story reaches. The fluorescent lights of Carson and Associates hummed their usual monotonous tune as Avery Cole sat alone in Conference Room C, surrounded by towers of financial documents that told stories their authors never intended to reveal. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the building was a tomb of ambition where only the desperate and the obsessed still worked. Avery was both. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision, cross-referencing import manifests against customs declarations, watching numbers that should have aligned diverge like galaxies expanding away from truth. The Moretti Group's financials were a masterpiece of obfuscation, not obvious fraud, but something far more sophisticated. Money moved through shell companies like water through a maze, always flowing, never quite arriving where it claimed to be going. "Beautiful," she murmured, her voice the only sound in the silence. Not a compliment, an acknowledgement. Whoever had constructed this system understood the poetry of deception. Her lower back ached, a constant companion these past weeks. She shifted in the chair, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach, to the swell she'd been hiding with progressively larger blazers and strategic positioning behind desks. 22 weeks, 5 months. A secret that grew heavier every day in ways that had nothing to do with physical weight. No one at the firm knew. No one in her life knew. That was exactly how it needed to stay. The pregnancy had been unplanned, the father a mistake she'd corrected by removing him from her life entirely. Marcus, ambitious, charming, and catastrophically married, though he'd somehow forgotten to mention that detail for 3 months. When she'd discovered the truth, she'd ended it with the same cold precision she applied to fraudulent balance sheets. No drama, no explanations, just a door closed and locked. She'd considered every option with the same analytical approach she used for everything else. Termination, adoption, single parenthood. Each choice weighed, measured, projected across spreadsheets of her own making. In the end, the decision had been startlingly simple. She wanted this child. She didn't need Marcus, didn't want him. She had a career that paid well, savings that provided security, and a stubborn independence that had carried her through worse. But Carson and Associates was old school in ways that mattered. Partners' meetings still happened at steakhouses where women were noted but not quite included. Maternity leave was offered but subtly penalized. And Avery had just made senior accountant, the youngest in firm history. Pregnant and unmarried would change how they saw her. She'd become a liability instead of an asset. So she'd made another calculated decision: hide it until she couldn't, then resign with dignity before they could whisper their judgments. 6 more weeks. Maybe 8 if she was strategic with her wardrobe. Then she'd disappear into a carefully planned maternity leave that would never end, resurface in another city with another firm, and build the life she wanted without explaining herself to anyone. The Moretti audit complicated everything. She'd been assigned to the case 3 weeks ago, a routine review required for their loan refinancing, except nothing about the Moretti Group was routine. The company was a labyrinth. Import businesses spanning textiles, machinery, and luxury goods, real estate holdings across 5 states, investment portfolios that seemed to multiply like cells under a microscope. And under it all, whispers, rumors that never quite solidified into accusations. The kind of reputation that made people careful around Luca Moretti, the man who controlled it all. Avery pulled up another file, this one detailing a series of cash transactions from 4 years ago. Large deposits, always just under reporting thresholds, flowing through a company called Mediterranean Trade Solutions that existed on paper but seemed to have no actual operations. She followed the trail backward, finding similar patterns in earlier years, gradually increasing in sophistication. Someone had been laundering money through this empire. The question was whether Luca Moretti had inherited this system or built it himself. Her phone buzzed, a text from Simone, the only person at the firm she'd call a friend. Still there? You're going to turn into a spreadsheet. Avery smiled despite herself and typed back, already happened, currently cell D47. Seriously though, go home, sleep. Remember that thing humans do? Vaguely. We'll investigate after this file. She set the phone down and stretched, her spine crackling in protest. The baby shifted, a flutter that still startled her, this evidence of another life existing inside her own. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the movement. Just me and you, she whispered. We're okay. We're going to be okay. It had become her mantra, a promise she made in empty offices and quiet mornings, in moments when the reality of single motherhood crashed against her carefully constructed plans. The conference room door opened without warning. Avery's hands flew to her keyboard, clicking away from the incriminating files to an innocuous summary sheet. Her heart hammered as she looked up, preparing an excuse for the late hours, the obsessive digging, Ms. Cole. The man in the doorway wasn't building security or a concerned partner. Luca Moretti stood there in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, his dark eyes taking in the scattered documents with an expression that revealed nothing. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe late 30s, with the kind of controlled presence that made rooms feel smaller. His face was all angles and shadows, handsome in a way that seemed almost deliberate, like genetics had known exactly what they were doing. Mr. Moretti. Avery stood, grateful that the desk hid her from the waist down. I wasn't expecting. I know. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded unnervingly final. Your firm mentioned you were thorough. I wanted to see for myself. It's nearly midnight. I keep unusual hours. His gaze moved across the documents, the open laptop, the coffee cups that marked the passage of her evening. As apparently do you. There was something unnerving about the way he looked at things. Not quick glances, but sustained observation, as if he could read stories in the arrangement of papers, divine intentions from the angle of her laptop screen. I believe in being comprehensive, Avery said, keeping her voice steady. Your company's structure is complex, diplomatic, accurate. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Most auditors send junior associates to dig through files at midnight. You're senior level. Why are you here? I like to understand what I'm signing off on. And do you? Understand? The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Avery had built her career on reading people through their financial decisions, seeing character in cash flow statements. Standing here with Luca Moretti felt like the inverse, being read by someone who understood that numbers only told half the story. I understand that your company has grown significantly over the past decade, she said carefully, that your import business navigated the 2008 crisis remarkably well when others collapsed, that you've diversified into sectors that don't typically cluster together without strategic reason. And that concerns you. It interests me. There's a difference? Always. He moved closer, stopping at the edge of the conference table. This close, she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that probably had a pretentious name like Midnight in Tuscany or Executive Power. I inherited a complicated legacy, Luca said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge that suggested he chose his words with the same precision she chose hers. My father built this company with methods I don't use. I've spent 5 years restructuring, legitimizing, cutting away operations that couldn't survive scrutiny. What you're finding in those files, he gestured to her laptop, is the past, not the present. The past informs the present. Does it? Or does the present redefine the past? Avery met his eyes, dark brown and unreadable. In accounting, we don't deal in philosophy. We deal in evidence. Then you'll find evidence of exactly what I said. Transactions that ended, relationships that were terminated, a company being rebuilt from the inside out. And if I find evidence of something else? You won't. The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it set off alarms she'd learned to trust, the instinct that came from years of watching people lie about money, power, and consequences. I'll need access to additional records, Avery said. Mediterranean Trade Solutions, for one. The corporate structure suggests that company was dissolved 3 years ago. I can provide the dissolution documents. I'll need transaction histories, bank statements, communications with principals. Of course. He pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the table. My personal number, call any time. I want this audit completed properly. I want you to understand exactly what this company is now. Avery picked up the card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. The kind of detail that spoke to someone who understood that everything communicated, even business cards. Why? She asked. Most clients try to limit auditor access, not encourage it. Most clients have something to hide. And you don't? Luca's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. Ms. Cole, we all have things we'd rather keep private. The question is whether those things are relevant to your audit. The baby shifted again, a stronger movement this time, and Avery fought to keep her expression neutral. She pressed one hand against the table edge, using it as an anchor. Are you all right? Luca's question came faster than she expected, his eyes narrowing slightly. Long day. Low blood sugar. I'm fine. You should eat. There's a diner 3 blocks from here that stays open late. Maria's. Tell her I sent you. She'll make you something good. The concern in his voice felt genuine, which somehow made it worse. Avery didn't want his concern, didn't want him noticing anything about her beyond her professional competence. I'm fine, she repeated. Just need to finish these files. It's midnight. I'm aware. Do you always work yourself to exhaustion? Do you always visit auditors in the middle of the night? Only the interesting ones. Something in the way he said it made her pulse quicken, and she hated herself for it. This was exactly the kind of situation she'd sworn to avoid. Professional boundaries blurred by attraction, judgment compromised by chemistry. She'd made that mistake with Marcus, and look where it had gotten her. Mr. Moretti, I appreciate your cooperation, but I think it's best if we maintain appropriate professional distance during this audit. Of course. He stepped back, the warmth draining from his expression. Forgive me, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. You didn't, she started, then stopped. Better to let him think he had. Better to rebuild the walls that had somehow started to crack. I'll send you a formal request for the additional documents tomorrow. I'll have them ready. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Cole? Yes? Be careful going home. This part of town isn't always safe at this hour. Before she could respond, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Avery exhaled slowly, her heart still racing. She looked down at the business card, at the phone number embossed in simple black font. Personal line. Call any time. She should throw it away. Use the official company channels. Maintain the boundaries she'd just insisted upon. Instead, she slipped it into her briefcase. The parking garage was nearly empty when Avery finally packed up at 1:30 a.m. Her car sat alone under the flickering fluorescent lights, and she was suddenly very aware of how isolated the space felt, how every footstep echoed against concrete. She clicked the key fob, and the car's lights blinked in response. Almost there. Just 30 feet of empty garage, then she'd be safe inside her. The sound of another car engine made her turn. A black SUV with tinted windows had pulled up to the garage entrance, blocking the exit. The engine idled, but no one emerged. Avery's grip tightened on her briefcase. She was being paranoid. It was late. Someone else working insane hours. Nothing sinister about. The passenger door opened. A man stepped out, and everything about him screamed wrong. Too casual for business attire, too purposeful for random. His eyes locked on her with the kind of focus that made her stomach drop. Avery Cole? His voice carried across the concrete. She didn't answer, didn't move. Every instinct screamed danger. We just want to talk, the man said, walking toward her with measured steps. About the work you're doing for Moretti. Behind him, the driver's door opened. Another man emerged, bigger, moving to flank her other side. Avery's mind raced through options. Run. Where? The stairwell was farther than her car. Scream. Who would hear? Fight. She was 5 months pregnant and alone against 2 men who looked like they broke bones professionally. I don't discuss client business, she managed, voice steadier than she felt. You're going to want to make an exception. The first man was close now, 10 feet and closing. See, we have questions about some very specific transactions, and you seem like the kind of person who pays attention to details. I'm calling security. She reached for her phone. I wouldn't. The second man's voice was flat, mechanical. He pulled back his jacket just enough to show the gun holstered at his hip. Fear crashed through her adrenaline. This wasn't a mugging. This was something worse. Something connected to the files she'd been digging through, the patterns she'd been tracing. Mediterranean trade solutions, money laundering, criminal entanglements, and now men with guns asking questions in parking garages at 1:30 a.m. "My firm knows I'm here," Avery said, backing toward her car. "People are expecting me home. If I don't show up, then you should come with us quietly so you can get home safe." The first man smiled, and it was the worst thing she'd seen all night. "Just a conversation. Then we all go about our business." They were 5 feet away now. Avery's back hit her car door. Trapped. No way out. No way to... Tires squealed at the garage entrance. A silver Mercedes appeared like something out of a movie, cutting between Avery and the two men with inches to spare. The driver's door flew open, and Luca Moretti stepped out with the kind of controlled fury that made the air feel dangerous. "Gentlemen," his voice was ice over steel, "you're trespassing." The two men exchanged glances. The first one's smile disappeared. "Mr. Moretti, didn't realize this was your accountant." "Now you do. Leave." "We were just having a conversation. You were threatening an employee of Carson and Associates in a private garage. That's assault. Battery if you touched her. I have security footage from 3 angles." Luca pulled out his phone, screen already showing a live camera feed. "Want me to send it to the police or to your employer?" The second man's hand had moved toward his jacket, but Luca's eyes tracked the movement. "I wouldn't," Luca said softly. "I have 6 men in the stairwell, 4 more outside, and a very short tolerance for stupidity. You pull that weapon, you don't leave this garage." The silence stretched thin and terrible. Finally, the first man raised his hand slowly. "Just a misunderstanding." "Then you'll have no problem leaving. Now." They retreated to their SUV, moving with the careful coordination of people who knew when they were outmatched. The engine gunned and they disappeared down the ramp, taillights vanishing into the night. Avery realized she was shaking. Her legs felt liquid, her heart hammering so hard it hurt. She pressed one hand to her stomach instinctively, checking, needing to know that, "Are you hurt?" Luca was there suddenly, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. I don't... The words wouldn't come. Shock was setting in, adrenaline crashing into fear. "Come on, we're getting you out of here." My car. I'll have someone drive it to your address. You're coming with me." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist on independence, on handling this herself, on maintaining the professional distance she'd demanded just hours earlier. But her hands were shaking too hard to hold keys, and the parking garage suddenly felt like a trap waiting to spring. Luca guided her to the Mercedes, his hand never leaving her elbow. She sank into the passenger seat, and he closed the door with a gentle click that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. He made 3 calls while walking to the driver's side, his voice low and commanding. By the time he slid behind the wheel, people were already appearing, security personnel materializing from the stairwell, one of them heading toward her abandoned car. "How did you know?" Avery asked as he pulled out of the garage. "I didn't, but I had someone watching the building after I left." "Why?" "Because I recognized the risk you don't." He glanced at her, his expression hard. "You've been digging into Mediterranean trade solutions. That company had connections to people who don't appreciate scrutiny. You said it was dissolved." "It was. That doesn't mean everyone connected to it moved on." Avery's mind was racing, trying to piece together implications. "Those men, they weren't your people?" "No. They work for someone who used to work with my father, someone who thinks you might have found something that could hurt him." "Did I?" "Probably." Luca's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "My father kept records of everything. Insurance, he called it. Information that could destroy careers, end partnerships, send people to prison. When I took over, I found files that implicated dozens of people in various criminal enterprises. I've spent 5 years quietly extracting us from those entanglements. And making enemies in the process." "Yes. So tonight, was the Rossetti family trying to find out what you know before I can use it against them? Or before you can?" The car moved through empty streets, city lights blurring past the windows. Avery tried to process what he was saying, but her thoughts kept fragmenting, returning to the gun at that man's hip, the smile that promised violence. I can't continue this audit, she said finally. If my digging puts me at risk, it's too late for that. They know you've seen the files. Backing away now just makes you a loose end to tie up. Then what am I supposed to do? Luca was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge of something that might have been regret. Let me protect you until this resolves. I don't need protection. I need... She stopped, unsure what she actually needed. Safety, distance. A way to rewind the last 6 hours and choose different files to examine. You need somewhere secure while I handle this. The Rossetti family won't stop because they failed tonight. They'll come back smarter, quieter. So what? I hide? For how long? As long as it takes. Avery looked out the window, watching her city transform into unfamiliar territory. Upscale neighborhoods gave way to gated communities, then to estates hidden behind walls and elaborate landscaping. Where are you taking me? My home. It's secure. They won't reach you there. I can't just move into your house. You can, and you will, unless you have a better solution. She didn't. That was the terrible truth underneath her protests. She had an apartment with standard locks, no security system, and neighbors who wouldn't notice if she disappeared for days. She had no family in the city. Her sister was somewhere in Seattle, estranged over an argument Avery could barely remember the details of anymore. She had Simone, but dragging her friend into this felt unconscionable. And she had a pregnancy she couldn't explain, couldn't reveal, couldn't use as a reason for the desperate vulnerability she felt. This is insane, she whispered. Yes, Luca agreed, but it's also necessary. The Mercedes turned through iron gates that opened automatically, rolling up a curved driveway to a house that looked like it belonged in architectural magazines. Modern lines, walls of glass, subtle lighting that made everything look both dramatic and welcoming. Luca parked in a garage that held 3 other vehicles, all expensive, all pristine. He came around to open her door, and Avery stepped out on legs that still felt unsteady. I need my things, she said. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I'll have someone collect them tomorrow. Tonight, you rest. He led her through a mudroom into a kitchen that was all marble and stainless steel, then up a curved staircase to a second-floor hallway lined with doors. This is the guest wing, Luca explained, opening the 3rd door on the right. Private bathroom, walk-in closet. My room is at the other end of the house. You'll have complete privacy. The room was beautiful. Understated luxury with a king bed sitting area and windows that probably offered stunning views in daylight. Right now, they just reflected Avery's pale face, her wide eyes, the exhaustion written in every line of her posture. There's a phone by the bed, Luca continued. Direct line to my cell. Press 1. Anything you need. Anytime you call. You're acting like I'm in witness protection. You are. Informal, but effective. He paused in the doorway, his expression softening slightly. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I'm not going to let them hurt you because you did your job too well. Avery sank onto the edge of the bed, feeling the fight drain out of her. How long have you known they were watching me? 3 days, since you requested the Mediterranean files. And you didn't warn me? I had people shadowing you. I thought that was enough. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. You should have told me. Yes, I should have. He looked at her with something that might have been actual remorse. I underestimated how aggressive they'd be. That's on me, and I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air between them, unexpected and genuine. Avery didn't know what to do with it. Get some rest, Luca said finally. We'll figure everything else out in the morning. He closed the door gently, leaving her alone in the beautiful room that felt like a cage lined with silk. Avery sat there for a long moment, then stood and walked to the bathroom. She turned on the lights, blinking at the brightness, and caught sight of herself in the mirror, pale, frightened, and obviously, unmistakably pregnant. The blazer she'd worn all day had come unbuttoned at some point, probably when Luca had helped her into the car. The blouse beneath had pulled tight across her stomach, revealing the swell she'd spent months hiding. No, she whispered. No, no, no. He'd seen. He had to have seen. You couldn't miss it. Not this close, not in this light. But he hadn't said anything, hadn't asked questions or offered commentary. He'd just brought her here, to safety, and promised protection. Avery pressed both hands to her stomach, feeling the baby shift in response. "We're okay," she whispered, the mantra coming automatically. "We're going to be okay." But for the first time, she wasn't sure she believed it. Outside her window, past the reflected lights of the estate, the city sparkled in the distance. Somewhere out there, men with guns were making plans. Criminal empires were calculating risks and responses. And she was caught in the middle of something that spreadsheets couldn't solve, all because she'd been too good at her job. Avery turned away from the mirror and her reflection's accusing eyes. She needed to sleep. Tomorrow she'd think. Tomorrow she'd plan. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to extract herself from this impossible situation. Tonight, she was just too tired to do anything but surrender to the exhaustion pulling at her bones. She lay down on the bed fully clothed, one hand still resting on her stomach. And despite everything, the fear, the danger, the complete upheaval of her carefully controlled life, sleep claimed her almost immediately. In the morning, everything would change. But tonight, for a few hours, she could pretend the world made sense. Sunlight burned through unfamiliar windows, dragging Avery from sleep with the disorienting weight of not knowing where she was. For 3 seconds, she lay perfectly still, cataloging details. High thread count sheets, the faint scent of lavender. Silence so complete it felt engineered. Then memory crashed back. The parking garage. The men. The gun. Luca Moretti bringing her here. She sat up too quickly, and her stomach lurched in protest. Morning sickness had been mercifully mild until now, but stress had a way of making everything worse. She made it to the bathroom just in time, her body rejecting the terror of the previous night in the most visceral way possible. When the nausea finally subsided, she rinsed her mouth and looked at herself in the mirror. Same haunted eyes, same blonde hair falling out of yesterday's professional twist. Same impossible situation. Her phone buzzed from the nightstand. She'd somehow managed to plug it in before collapsing. Muscle memory overriding panic. 3 missed calls from Simone. 2 texts demanding to know if she was alive, and 1 voicemail from her boss at Carson & Associates. "Avery, it's Richard. Call me when you get this. We need to discuss the Moretti audit. Some concerns have been raised about the scope of your investigation." Concerns. The word landed like lead in her chest. Someone had already gotten to the firm. Someone who wanted her to stop digging, back off, pretend she hadn't seen what was buried in those files. She was about to call Simone when a soft knock interrupted. "Ms. Cole?" A woman's voice, accented and gentle. "I have breakfast if you're awake." Avery opened the door to find a woman in her 50s holding a tray laden with food that looked like it had been photographed for a magazine spread. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, orange juice, and a crystal glass. "Mr. Moretti thought you might be hungry," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Rosa. I manage the house." "Thank you, but I couldn't possibly eat all this." "Try. You need strength." Rosa set the tray on the sitting area table, her eyes kind but assessing. "Mr. Moretti says you had a difficult night." Understatement of the century. Avery sat down, and Rosa poured coffee from a small carafe, the rich aroma almost enough to make her stomach consider rebellion again. "Actually, do you have tea instead?" The words came out before she could stop them. "Of course. Herbal, green. Herbal would be perfect." Rosa's expression shifted microscopically, a flicker of something that might have been understanding, but she simply nodded. "I'll bring it right away." She left, and Avery stared at the breakfast tray, at the care that had gone into presentation, at the quiet assumption that she belonged here. This wasn't how witness protection worked in movies. There should be safe houses and FBI agents, not guest rooms with Egyptian cotton sheets and personal chefs. She picked at the eggs, forcing herself to eat. The baby needed nutrition even if her appetite had vanished. 22 weeks, just over 5 months. The second trimester supposedly brought energy and reduced nausea, but stress was rewriting all the rules. Rosa returned with tea in a delicate cup, steam rising in lazy spirals. Ginger and chamomile, good for settling stomachs. "Thank you." Avery wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. Rosa hesitated at the door. "Mr. Moretti is in his office when you're ready. 3rd door on the left, downstairs. But take your time. He has calls scheduled all morning." When she was alone again, Avery pulled out her phone and called Simone. "Jesus Christ, Avery, where are you? I drove by your apartment at 7 this morning and you weren't there. Your car wasn't there. You're not answering. I'm okay. Something happened last night. I can't really explain, but I'm safe. Safe where? Avery, you're scaring me. I'm at Luca Moretti's house. Silence. Then, you're where? It's not what you think. There was an incident at the office. Some people connected to his company tried to... She stopped, unsure how to explain without revealing too much. Luca thought it was safer if I stayed here temporarily. Some people tried to what? Avery, what the hell is going on? I found some irregularities in the Moretti financials, past connections to criminal activity, and apparently the people involved don't want that information surfacing. So you're hiding at the house of the man you're auditing, the man whose company might be criminally compromised? Put that way, it sounded insane. He's not involved. His father was, but Luca's been cleaning it up. The threat is from outside parties. And you believe him? Did she? Avery thought about Luca's face in the parking garage, the controlled fury when he'd told those men to leave, the way he'd protected her without hesitation. Yeah, she said quietly. I do. Simone exhaled slowly. Okay. Do you need me to bring you anything? Clothes? Your laptop? Luca's having someone collect my things today, but Simone, Richard called. He said there were concerns about the audit scope. I heard. There was a closed-door meeting yesterday afternoon, partners only. When I asked about it, I got shut down fast. Someone's pressuring the firm. Looks that way. Avery, maybe you should step back from this. Let someone else finish the audit. That's what they want. For me to disappear. Stop asking questions. Then maybe you should. This isn't worth your life. Avery looked down at her stomach, at the secret that complicated every decision. I can't just walk away. Why not? You're an accountant, not a detective. Let law enforcement handle whatever criminal mess this is. And say what? That I found some suspicious transactions from 4 years ago? I don't have proof of anything current, just patterns that suggest historical wrongdoing. Then give them the patterns and let them investigate. It made sense. It was the rational choice. But something stubborn in Avery resisted the idea of backing down, of letting these men frighten her into silence. I'll think about it, she said finally. Avery, I have to go. I'll call you later. She hung up before Simone could argue further and sat there holding her phone, staring at Richard's voicemail notification. She should call him back, should explain her absence, address whatever concerns had been raised. But she knew how that conversation would go. Subtle suggestions that she was overstepping, reminders about maintaining client relationships, implications that perhaps this assignment was too challenging for someone at her level. They'd pull her from the audit, assign someone more senior, more malleable, more willing to overlook inconvenient details, and the truth would stay buried. Avery set down the phone and finished her tea, letting the warmth settle her nerves. Then she showered using the expensive products lined up in the bathroom, dressed in yesterday's clothes that felt grimy and wrong, and went looking for Luca Moretti. The house revealed itself in daylight as even more impressive than she'd realized. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of manicured gardens and a pool that looked carved from blue glass. Art lined the walls, real pieces, not prints, including what might have been an actual Rothko in the living room. Money lived here, old money rebuilt into something sleeker and more dangerous. She found Luca's office exactly where Rosa had indicated. The door was open and he sat behind a massive desk, phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved from stone. I don't care what Rossetti thinks he's owed, Luca said, his voice cold enough to frost glass. The partnership ended when his people pulled guns on an innocent woman. Tell him if he wants a conversation, it happens through lawyers, not parking garages. He looked up, saw Avery in the doorway, and his expression shifted fractionally. He held up one finger, wait, and returned to the call. No negotiation. He crossed a line. Now he deals with consequences. A pause. Then let him try. We both know how that ends. He hung up and stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Today's was navy, perfectly tailored, making him look like he belonged in boardrooms deciding the fate of nations. How are you feeling? He asked. Like my life isn't mine anymore. Fair assessment. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. We need to talk. Avery sat, noticing the files stacked on his desk. Her name was visible on one of them. A dossier he'd compiled. Background information. Research. The kind of thing you did when you needed to understand someone completely. "You've been investigating me," she said. "Yes. The moment you were assigned this audit, I needed to know who I was dealing with." "And what did you find?" "That you're brilliant. Youngest senior accountant in Carson and Associates history. Master's in forensic accounting from Northwestern. Reputation for being thorough to the point of obsessive. No criminal record. No financial irregularities. No obvious leverage points." He paused. "No family in the area. No emergency contacts listed at your firm beyond a friend named Simone Chen." The isolation laid out that way felt stark. "Is there a point to this?" "The point is that you're alone. No one to notice if something happens to you beyond a friend who works 70-hour weeks and might assume you're just busy." Luca's expression hardened. "That makes you vulnerable." "I'm aware." "Are you? Because you spent 5 months hiding a pregnancy at a firm that would penalize you for it, planning to disappear rather than fight for the career you've built." "That's not awareness. That's surrender." Avery's breath caught. She looked down at her stomach, at the slight swell visible now, without the blazer to hide it. "When did you know?" "Last night. When I helped you into the car, your jacket shifted. You're what, 5 months?" 22 weeks. "And the father?" "Not in the picture. Not relevant." Luca studied her with that unnerving intensity. "You plan to finish this audit, resign, and vanish." "I plan to take control of my life on my terms." "By running." Anger flared hot and sudden. "Don't you dare judge me. You don't know what it's like to be a woman in my field, to fight for every scrap of respect, to know that one wrong move makes you a cautionary tale instead of a colleague." "You're right. I don't know that." His voice softened. "But I know what it's like to inherit a legacy you didn't choose and spend years trying to prove you're different, to have people assume the worst because of your last name." The parallel hung between them, unwanted but accurate. They were both trapped by circumstances not of their making, both fighting to rewrite narratives other people had already decided. "The firm called," Avery said. "They want to discuss concerns about my audit scope." "Rossetti got to them." "So it seems." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Simone thinks I should step back, let someone else finish." "That's the safe choice." "But not the right one." Luca's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No, not the right one. You want me to keep digging. I want you to do whatever keeps you alive and safe. But if you choose to continue, I'll give you everything, every file my father kept, every record of every transaction, the complete truth about what this company was and what I'm trying to make it become." "Why? What do you gain from that?" "Clarity. If Rossetti thinks you're a threat, it's because he doesn't know what you've found. Uncertainty makes him dangerous. But if everything is documented, investigated, and reported through proper channels, I'm protected and you're no longer worth silencing." It made a cold kind of sense. "You want me to weaponize the audit. I want you to finish it properly. Document everything. Turn over findings to the appropriate authorities if criminal activity is confirmed. Let the law handle what should have been handled years ago. And if that destroys your company, then it deserves to be destroyed. I'm not my father. I won't protect an empire built on blood." Avery searched his face for deception, for the calculation she'd expect from someone with his background. But his expression held only weary determination, the look of someone who'd been fighting a war too long and was ready for it to end. "I'll need complete access," she said. "No restrictions. No files held back because they're embarrassing or complicated." "Agreed. And I want protection, not just for me. For my baby." As something shifted in Luca's eyes, a flicker of emotion too quick to name. "You have it, both of you." "I haven't decided if I'm keeping it." The lie came automatically, protective. "Yes, you have." He said it gently, without judgment. "You're 5 months along. You could have terminated in the first trimester if you wanted. You're still here because you chose this." Avery's throat tightened. "Can do this alone," she whispered. "I can do this alone," she whispered. "I know, but you don't have to." The offer hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them fully understood yet. This wasn't romance or attraction, it was something stranger and more fragile. An alliance formed in crisis. Two people who didn't quite trust each other deciding to trust anyway. "Show me the files," Avery said. Luca stood and walked to a wall that looked solid until he pressed something that made a section swing open, revealing a safe room beyond. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled with dates spanning decades. "My father's insurance policy," Luca explained. "He documented everything, every bribe, every laundered dollar, every favor traded. He called it protection. I call it evidence." Avery stepped into the room, feeling the weight of decades of secrets pressing down. "This is enough to destroy dozens of people." "Yes, which is why I've been careful about how I use it. Releasing everything at once would start a war, but targeted disclosure, properly documented through official channels, creates accountability without chaos." "Exactly." She ran her fingers along the cabinet labels, stopping at one marked Mediterranean Trade Solutions. Can I take these with me?" "They don't leave this room, but you can work here. I'll have Rosa bring whatever you need. Laptop, coffee, food." "Tea," Avery corrected automatically. "Coffee makes me nauseous now." Luca's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Tea, then." He left her there, surrounded by evidence of crimes she was only beginning to understand. Avery pulled open the first drawer and started reading, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of forensic analysis. Numbers didn't lie. They couldn't dissemble or deflect. They simply were, and if you knew how to read them, they told stories their creators never intended. Hours dissolved. Rosa brought tea and sandwiches Avery ate without tasting. The baby kicked occasionally, small flutters that reminded her she wasn't alone in this quiet room full of other people's sins. She was deep in a ledger from 2015 when Luca appeared in the doorway. "It's almost 7, he said. Avery looked up, startled. "What?" "You've been in here for 9 hours. She glanced at her laptop clock. He was right. The afternoon had vanished into transaction records and shell company structures. "I didn't realize." "Find anything useful?" "Everything's useful. Your father was meticulous, almost compulsive about documentation." She gestured to the papers spread across the small table she'd claimed. Mediterranean Trade Solutions was a front for laundering money from 6 different criminal organizations. The Rossetti family was one of them, but there were others. Construction companies in New Jersey, import businesses in Miami, even a restaurant chain in Chicago. All connected to my father. As the middleman, he provided the infrastructure to clean their money, took a percentage, and kept records that could burn them all if needed. And now those records are yours. Now those records are evidence. Avery stood, stretching muscles that had stiffened from hours of sitting. "But Luca, if I turn this over to law enforcement, it won't just implicate the Rossetti family. It'll trigger investigations across multiple states, federal charges, RICO cases that could take years to prosecute." "Good. You say that like it won't touch you. You inherited this company. You're legally responsible for its operations." "I have my own documentation, 5 years of records showing systematic divestment from illegal operations. Contracts terminated. Relationships ended. A complete restructuring toward legitimate business." He leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion showing through his controlled exterior. "I've been building my defense since the day I took over. You were planning this all along. The audit, the exposure, everything." "I was planning survival. Your audit just accelerated the timeline." Avery sank back into the chair, the full scope finally crystallizing. "You wanted someone to find this. That's why you gave me unrestricted access. You needed an outside investigator to discover what you couldn't report yourself without looking complicit." "Yes." "And if the Rossetti family hadn't threatened me, if everything had gone smoothly, I would have guided you toward the right files and let you reach the same conclusions." Luca's expression was unreadable. "But they did threaten you, which means they're more desperate than I anticipated." "Why? What are they afraid I'll find?" "Something current, something that can't be explained away as historical wrongdoing." He straightened, tension visible in his shoulders. "Which means someone in my organization is still working with them, someone I haven't identified yet." The implication sent ice through Avery's veins. "You think there's a mole?" I think my father built relationships that didn't die with him. Someone's been feeding information to Rossetti. That's how they knew you were digging into Mediterranean trade solutions. How they knew where to find you. Then I'm not safe here either. You're safer here than anywhere else. This house has security most government buildings would envy. But you're right that we need to move faster than I planned. Move faster how? I have a meeting tomorrow with federal prosecutors. Off the record, preliminary. I'm going to offer them everything. Full cooperation, complete access to my father's files, testimony against everyone involved. In exchange for immunity. In exchange for a future that isn't built on lies. Luca moved into the room, his presence seeming to fill the small space. I'm tired, Avery. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering which employee is betraying me. Tired of being my father's son instead of my own man. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the controlled businessman or the dangerous protector. This was someone as trapped as she was, fighting for freedom from legacies neither of them had chosen. What do you need from me? She asked. Your audit. Completed, documented, professional. Something prosecutors can use to corroborate my father's records. Independent verification from a respected forensic accountant. I'm not respected. I'm junior level, unmarried, and pregnant. Defense attorneys will tear me apart on the stand. Then let them try. You're also brilliant, thorough, and impossible to intimidate. You think they haven't seen those qualities in 5 minutes of conversation? Despite everything, warmth bloomed in her chest at the certainty in his voice. When was the last time someone had believed in her competence without qualification or caveat? My firm will fire me, she said. Probably, but you'll have bigger offers by the end of the week. Every agency and corporation that deals with financial crime will want the accountant who helped bring down a multi-state money laundering operation. And if I want to disappear instead, raise my baby in peace somewhere far from courtrooms and criminal investigations? Luca's expression softened. Then I'll help you do that too. Whatever you choose, Avery, I'll support it. But don't choose out of fear. Choose because it's what you actually want. The baby kicked hard, as if offering an opinion. Avery pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the movement, the insistent reminder that her choices affected more than just herself now. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need, but think upstairs away from these files. You've been breathing dust and old crimes for 9 hours. Come have dinner with me. That's not necessary. It's entirely necessary. You're pregnant and haven't eaten a proper meal all day. Rosa made something that smells incredible, and you're going to sit down and consume it like a civilized person instead of working yourself into exhaustion. The command in his voice should have annoyed her. Instead, it felt almost comforting. Someone else making decisions, carrying weight, insisting she take care of herself. Dangerous territory. She'd learned young that depending on others meant disappointment, but exhaustion was making her resistance crumble, and the smell of food drifting from somewhere in the house made her stomach growl traitorously. Fine, she conceded, but after dinner, I'm going back to work. We'll see. They ate in a dining room that could have seated 20, but felt intimate with just the two of them at one end of a polished table. Rosa had made chicken marsala with roasted vegetables and pasta that melted on the tongue. Avery ate with an appetite that surprised her, the baby apparently approving of Italian cuisine. Tell me about her, Luca said halfway through the meal. Who? Your sister, the one you're estranged from. Avery set down her fork. How did you, write? The background investigation. Her name is Harper, 3 years younger, lives in Seattle, works as a graphic designer. He paused. You haven't spoken in 2 years. 2.5. Want to tell me why? Not particularly. Humor me anyway. Avery picked up her wine glass, then remembered she couldn't drink and set it down again with more force than necessary. Harper thought I was too focused on my career. I thought she was wasting her potential working freelance jobs that barely paid rent. We argued about priorities and choices and whether success meant selling out or growing up. Eventually, we stopped arguing and started just not talking. And now? Now I'm pregnant and alone and she doesn't know, and I wouldn't know how to tell her if I wanted to. The words came out bitter. She'd probably say I told you so, that I was so busy building my perfect career, I forgot to build a life. Would she be right? Avery looked at him sharply, but his expression held only curiosity, not judgment. Maybe, she admitted. I spent 10 years proving I was good enough, smart enough, professional enough to matter. And somewhere in there, I forgot that mattering to strangers at firms and boardrooms isn't the same as mattering to people who actually know you. It's not too late to change that, isn't it? I'm 5 months pregnant with a baby I'll be raising alone while testifying against crime families and probably losing my job. Not exactly the time to reconnect with estranged family. Or exactly the time. When everything else is chaos, family matters more, says the man whose father built a criminal empire. Luca's smile was sharp and sad. My father taught me exactly how important family is, and how badly you can damage it by choosing power over people. He stood, collecting plates despite Rosa's protest from the kitchen, which is why I'm not making his mistakes. Later, against her own plans, Avery found herself in the living room instead of back in the file room. Luca had somehow convinced her that rest was more productive than exhaustion, and her body had betrayed her by agreeing. She sat on a sofa that probably cost more than her car, feet tucked under her, while Luca worked at a laptop across the room. The silence felt companionable rather than awkward. Two people existing in the same space without needing to fill it with conversation. Can I ask you something? Avery said eventually. Of course. Why didn't you just destroy your father's files, burn them, erase them, make them disappear? Why keep evidence that could destroy you? Luca looked up from his laptop, considering the question. Because destroying them would mean nothing changed. The crimes would still have happened. The victims would still have been hurt. The systems that enabled it all would still be in place. He paused. My father kept those files as insurance. I kept them as accountability. The only way I could live with inheriting his empire was by promising myself I'd use it to make things right, even if it cost you everything. Especially then. Otherwise, what's the point? Avery understood that logic more than she wanted to admit. It was the same calculation she'd made about the pregnancy, the willingness to sacrifice comfort and security for something that mattered more. I'll finish the audit, she said quietly. I'll document everything I find, testify if needed, help the prosecutors build their case. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Luca smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his usual control. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might ruin both our lives. Or save them. We'll find out together. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and Avery winced. Luca noticed immediately. Are you all right? Fine, just active tonight. She rubbed her stomach absently. Doctor says movement is good, means everything's developing normally. When's your next appointment? Thursday, though I'm not sure how I'm supposed to get there from witness protection. I'll drive you, or arrange a car with security if you prefer privacy. The casual assumption that he'd be involved, that her medical appointments were now part of his concern, should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like relief. The weight of solitary responsibility lifting just slightly. You don't have to do this, she said. Any of this. You could have just provided the files and let me handle everything else on my own. I could have, but I'm not going to. Luca closed his laptop and stood, walking to stand by the windows overlooking the darkened gardens. My father spent his life hurting people for profit. I'm not going to add a pregnant woman and her child to that list just because it's convenient. I'm not your responsibility. No, but you're under my protection, which makes you my priority. He turned to face her. And for what it's worth, I think you're remarkable. The situation you're in would break most people. You're just getting angry and working harder. Is that a compliment or an observation? Both. Avery stood, suddenly needing distance from the intensity of his attention. I should get some rest. Long day tomorrow if I'm finishing this audit. Avery? She stopped at the doorway. Whatever happens, Luca said quietly, you and the baby are safe here. That's not negotiable. Even if you decide to walk away from all of this, even if you testify against me instead of with me, you're protected. That's my word. The promise hung in the air, absolute and unexpected. Avery nodded, not trusting her voice, and left before the emotions building in her chest could spill over into something embarrassing like tears. In the guest room, she changed into borrowed pajamas Rosa had left. Silk, expensive, too beautiful for sleep, and lay in the dark trying to make sense of the past 48 hours. Her life had exploded, professional security shattered, physical safety compromised. The careful plan she'd made for solitary motherhood complicated by a man who insisted on caring whether she lived or died. She should be terrified, should be planning escape routes and exit strategies. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the dangerous, fragile possibility of not being alone. Her phone buzzed, a text from Simone. "Still alive?" Avery smiled despite herself and typed back, "Still alive, I'll call tomorrow. Promise." "You better. I'm this close to showing up wherever you are. Don't. It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated. Try easy sometime." Working on it. She set the phone aside and closed her eyes, one hand resting on her stomach, where the baby had finally settled into quiet. Tomorrow she'd dive back into files and evidence. Tomorrow she'd make decisions about prosecutors and testimony. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to navigate this impossible situation. Tonight, she just needed to sleep. And for the first time in months, surrounded by security she didn't have to provide for herself, Avery Cole let herself rest. The contraction started at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that had begun like any other. Avery had been at Luca's estate for 11 days, spending her waking hours buried in financial records that revealed a criminal ecosystem far more complex than she'd initially understood. The nausea had finally subsided, replaced by the constant backache and swollen ankles that made working in the file room uncomfortable but manageable, until her body decided that manageable was over. The first pain woke her from restless sleep, a tightening across her abdomen that felt wrong in a way she couldn't immediately articulate. She lay still, waiting for it to pass, telling herself it was nothing. Braxton Hicks contractions, maybe. The practice runs her pregnancy app had warned about. Then another came, sharper, and she checked the time, 5 minutes since the last one. "No," she whispered to the dark room. "Not yet. It's too early. 24 weeks and 3 days. Not viable. Not safe. The baby needed more time, weeks more, months more. This couldn't be happening." Another contraction, and this time it stole her breath. She reached for her phone with shaking hands and pressed the number Luca had programmed in. Direct line. One button. Anytime. He answered on the first ring, voice immediately alert despite the hour. "What's wrong?" "I think..." The contraction peaked, and she couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm coming." 30 seconds later, he was at her door, still buttoning a shirt thrown on over pajama pants. His eyes swept over her, cataloging details with the same intensity he brought to everything. "How far apart?" he asked, already pulling out his phone. 5 minutes? Maybe less." Avery tried to sit up and gasped as another wave hit. "It's too early, Luca. I'm only 24 weeks. The baby can't..." "Don't." His voice was firm, anchoring. "Don't go there yet. We're getting you to a hospital, and they're going to figure this out." He was already dialing, phone pressed to his ear. "I need an ambulance at my address. 24-week pregnancy, preterm labor, contractions 5 minutes apart." A pause. "Yes, I understand. We'll be ready." He hung up and moved to her side, his hand finding hers. "Ambulance is 7 minutes out. Can you stand?" "I think so." He helped her up, supporting her weight as another contraction made her double over. His arms stayed firm around her waist, steady and unshakable. "I've got you," he said quietly. "Breathe through it, in and out." Avery focused on his voice, on the rhythm he was setting, on anything except the terror clawing at her chest. This couldn't be happening. She'd been so careful. Rest when Rosa insisted. No stress beyond the unavoidable. Everything by the book. But bodies didn't always follow books. Rosa appeared in the hallway, face creased with concern, already holding a bag Avery didn't remember packing. "Hospital bag," Rosa explained, her accent thicker in her worry. "I made one after you arrived, just in case." "Thank you," Avery managed between contractions. The ambulance arrived with efficiency that suggested Luca had more pull with emergency services than normal citizens. The paramedics were professional, gentle, asking questions Avery answered on autopilot while they loaded her onto a gurney. 24 weeks. First pregnancy. No complications until now. No bleeding. Just pain and contractions that shouldn't be happening yet. Luca climbed into the ambulance without asking permission, his hand never leaving hers. "Sir, family only," one paramedic started. "I'm family," Luca said, his tone allowing no argument. The drive to the hospital blurred into a sequence of bright lights and medical jargon Avery only half understood. They were asking about her stress levels, her activity, whether she'd experienced any trauma. She wanted to laugh at that last question. Trauma, like being threatened in a parking garage, discovering her client's father ran a money laundering empire, and hiding in protective custody didn't count as traumatic. Instead, she said, "I've been resting. No physical trauma, just normal work stress." The paramedic made a note that Avery suspected translated to, "Patient is lying about stress levels." At the hospital, they whisked her into labor and delivery with an urgency that made her heart hammer. A nurse with kind eyes and efficient hands got her into a gown while firing questions. Another hooked her up to monitors that showed the baby's heartbeat, fast but steady, a sound that made Avery's throat tight with fear and love. "Contractions are regular," the nurse said, studying the monitor readout. 4 minutes apart now. Dr. Martinez is on her way." "What does that mean?" Avery asked. "Can they stop it?" "That's what we're going to try. The doctor will assess and decide on the best course of treatment." Luca stood by the window, giving the medical staff room to work, but close enough that Avery could see him. His face was carefully neutral, but she'd spent enough time reading people to recognize controlled fear when she saw it. Dr. Martinez arrived 15 minutes later, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the calm competence of someone who'd seen every pregnancy complication imaginable. She examined Avery with gentle efficiency, asked the same questions the paramedics had, and studied the monitor readings with an expression that revealed nothing. "All right," she said finally, pulling off her gloves. "Here's what's happening. You're in preterm labor, but your cervix hasn't dilated yet, which is good news. We're going to give you medication to try to stop the contractions and steroids to help the baby's lungs develop faster in case we can't stop them." "In case?" Avery's voice cracked. "What happens if you can't?" "Then we manage the delivery and give your baby the best possible care. But we're not there yet. First, we try to buy you more time." Dr. Martinez's expression softened. 24 weeks is tough, but not impossible. Every day we can keep this baby inside you improves their chances significantly. "What caused this?" Luca asked from his position by the window. Dr. Martinez glanced at him, then at Avery with a raised eyebrow. Avery started, then stopped, unsure how to explain. Not the father, not family, but somehow the person she trusted most right now. "I'm involved," Luca said simply. The doctor nodded, apparently satisfied with that vague explanation. Preterm labor can have many causes. Stress is a factor, but so are infections, placental issues, uterine abnormalities. Sometimes there's no clear cause at all. We'll run tests, but right now the priority is stopping these contractions. A nurse came in with an IV setup, and Avery watched as they inserted the line and began administering medication. The contractions continued for another 20 minutes, each one making her grip the bed rails and breathe through clenched teeth. Then gradually, they began to space out. 5 minutes, 7, 10. "That's what we want to see," Dr. Martinez said, satisfaction in her voice. "The medication's working. We're going to keep you here for observation, probably 48 hours minimum. Bed rest, monitoring, and if everything stays stable, we'll send you home with strict instructions." "Strict how?" Avery asked. "No work, no stress, lying down or reclining as much as possible. Someone to help you because you're not carrying groceries or doing housework. This baby needs you to do nothing but grow them for as long as possible." Avery thought about the files waiting in Luca's safe room, the audit she'd been racing to complete, the federal prosecutors expecting her documentation. "I have work. You have one job now," Dr. Martinez interrupted firmly. "Staying pregnant. Everything else is secondary." "She'll have everything she needs," Luca said. "Whatever it takes." After the doctor left and the contractions had stopped completely, Avery finally allowed herself to cry. Quiet tears that slid down her temples into her hair, her hands pressed protectively over her stomach. "Hey!" Luca was there suddenly, pulling a chair close to the bed. "The baby's okay. You heard the heartbeat. Strong and steady." "I almost lost them," Avery whispered, "because I was too stubborn to slow down, too focused on proving something that doesn't matter as much as I thought it did. You were doing your job. My job almost cost me my child. No, this isn't your fault." His hand covered hers, warm and solid. Preterm labor happens. The doctor said there might not even be a clear cause. You can't blame yourself for your body doing something you couldn't control. I should have rested more. Should have listened when Rosa told me to take breaks. Avery. He waited until she looked at him. You did everything right. You were careful. You followed the rules. Sometimes our bodies betray us anyway. That's not failure. That's just being human. The understanding in his voice nearly undid her. When was the last time someone had told her it was okay to not be perfect? That trying her best was enough even when outcomes went wrong? I'm scared, she admitted. I know. I don't know how to do this. The pregnancy, the baby, any of it. I had a plan, and now everything's falling apart. Then we make a new plan. One that starts with you and this baby staying healthy. We? She searched his face. Luca, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He squeezed her hand gently. You're not alone in this unless you choose to be. And even then, I'm not going far. Before Avery could respond, her hospital room door opened and two men in suits entered with the purposeful stride of people who were used to going wherever they wanted without invitation. Ms. Cole? I'm Agent Morrison, FBI. This is Agent Chen. We need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Luca Moretti. Luca stood immediately, positioning himself between Avery and the agents. She's in the hospital in preterm labor. Whatever questions you have can wait. I'm afraid they can't, Morrison said, his expression professionally neutral. We have reason to believe Ms. Cole may be in danger, and we need to understand the nature of her involvement with your organization. The nature of her involvement is that she's a forensic accountant doing her job, nothing more. Then why is she staying at your estate? Why did you personally bring her to the hospital? Why are you here at... Morrison checked his watch. 4:30 in the morning instead of her emergency contact or the father of her child? The implications hung heavy in the air. Avery could see exactly how this looked to outside observers. Young, pregnant accountant, powerful businessman with criminal connections, suspicious proximity. The narrative practically wrote itself, and it was completely wrong. Agent Morrison, Avery said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm staying at Mr. Moretti's estate because men connected to the Rossetti crime family attempted to abduct me from my office parking garage 11 days ago. Mr. Moretti intervened and offered protection while I complete my audit of his company's financial records. Morrison's expression shifted slightly. You were threatened. Yes, two men, one armed, demanding information about my audit findings. Mr. Moretti's security team has footage of the incident. Why wasn't this reported to law enforcement? Because I was terrified, and Mr. Moretti got me to safety before I could think clearly about next steps. Avery met the agent's eyes. And because I wasn't sure who to trust. If the Rossetti family knew about my audit, it meant someone was leaking information. I didn't know if that someone might be in law enforcement. Morrison exchanged a glance with Agent Chen, who'd been silent until now. We're going to need to see that footage, Chen said. You can have everything, Luca replied. The parking garage footage, the files Ms. Cole has been reviewing, my father's complete records of money laundering operations spanning 2 decades. I've been planning to bring all of this to federal prosecutors anyway. You just accelerated my timeline. Morrison's eyebrows rose. You're volunteering evidence of criminal activity? I'm volunteering evidence of my father's criminal activity. I've spent 5 years dismantling what he built. Ms. Cole's audit has helped document that transition. Luca's voice was steady, certain. I want immunity for my cooperation. But more than that, I want this finished. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder at ghosts. That's a conversation for prosecutors, not field agents, Morrison said. But we'll need formal statements from both of you. Ms. Cole, when you're released from the hospital, she's not going anywhere until the doctors clear her, Luca interrupted. You want statements? You can take them here or wait until she's stable. Mr. Moretti, I understand you're concerned, but no. The single word carried absolute finality. You don't get to stress her while she's fighting to stay pregnant. You want cooperation? You give us time. 48 hours minimum. Avery watched Morrison calculate the angles, weigh the benefits of pushing versus patience. Finally, he nodded. 48 hours. But Ms. Cole, you need to understand, if you're involved with Mr. Moretti beyond a professional relationship, that complicates everything. I understand, Avery said. But I'm not. He's protecting me because the alternative was letting me get killed for doing my job well. That's the extent of our involvement. It wasn't entirely true anymore, but it was true enough for federal agents who saw the world in neat categories of criminal and witness, perpetrator and victim. After they left, Avery exhaled slowly, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. That was a preview, Luca said quietly, of what happens when we move forward with this. Every detail of our lives examined, every interaction questioned. I know. You can still walk away. Tell them you were just doing an audit, you didn't find anything actionable, and you want to be left alone. Avery thought about the files she'd read, the shell companies and laundered millions, the lives destroyed by the criminal empire Luca's father had helped enable, the choice between comfortable silence and complicated truth. No, she said. I can't. Even if it means testifying, court appearances while pregnant or with a newborn, your name in newspapers connected to organized crime investigations? Even then, she looked at him, at the man who'd somehow become her unlikely ally in 11 impossible days. You said you kept your father's files as accountability. I need that too. I need to know I did the right thing even when it was hard. Something shifted in Luca's expression, respect mixed with something deeper she didn't have the energy to analyze. Then we do this together, he said. A nurse came in to check Avery's vitals, and Luca stepped back to give her space. The contractions had stopped completely now, the medication and rest working exactly as intended. The baby's heartbeat remained strong on the monitor, a steady reassurance that everything was okay for now. Your blood pressure is still elevated, the nurse noted. Try to relax, no excitement, no stress. Avery wanted to laugh. No stress. Right. While federal agents asked questions and crime families plotted revenge, and her body tried to evict her baby 3 months early. I'll try, she said instead. When the nurse left, Luca returned to the chair beside her bed. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, the careful control he usually maintained fraying at the edges. You should go home, Avery said. Get some actual sleep. I'm fine here. Luca, I'm not leaving. His tone allowed no argument. Not until the doctors say you're stable and out of danger. This could take days. Then I'll be here for days. Avery studied his face, trying to understand the loyalty that kept him in an uncomfortable hospital chair when he could be anywhere else. Why do you care this much? He was quiet for a long moment, and she thought he might not answer. Then, because someone should. Because you're facing all of this alone, and that's not right. Because... He stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his features. Because I know what it's like to be trapped by circumstances you didn't choose, and I don't want that for you or your baby. I chose to keep the pregnancy. But you didn't choose to be threatened, didn't choose to go into preterm labor, didn't choose to have your life turned upside down by my father's crimes. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I can't fix everything, Avery, but I can be here. I can make sure you're not facing this alone. The words settled into her chest, warm and uncomfortable. She'd built her entire adult life on self-sufficiency, on not needing anyone. And here was someone insisting on mattering, on being present, on caring whether she survived or broke, under the weight of everything happening. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded, then settled back in the chair, closing his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had evened into sleep, the light doze of someone accustomed to staying alert even while resting. Avery watched him, this man who'd become something she couldn't quite define. Not a friend, not a romantic interest, something in between, an anchor in the storm, a partner in an alliance neither had planned. Her phone buzzed, a text from Simone. Heard you're in the hospital, coming. Avery typed back quickly. How did you know? Rosa called me, said you needed friends. I'll be there in 20. Despite everything, warmth bloomed in Avery's chest. Rosa had called Simone, had recognized that Luca's presence, however genuine, wasn't the same as having someone who knew her history, her fears, her complicated relationship with vulnerability. Simone arrived exactly 20 minutes later, bursting through the door with the force of someone who'd been holding back worry for 11 days and was done pretending she wasn't terrified. Jesus, Avery. She pulled up short at the sight of Luca asleep in the chair. Is that Luca Moretti? Yes. He's been here all night? Since the contractions started. Simone's expression cycled through confusion, concern, and calculation. Okay, we're going to unpack all of that later. Right now, how are you? How's the baby? Stable. They stopped the contractions with medication. I'm on bed rest for the foreseeable future. And the audit? On hold indefinitely. Good. Simone sat on the edge of the bed, taking Avery's hand. Screw the audit. Screw the firm. You focus on staying pregnant. The FBI was here, Avery said quietly. Asking questions about my relationship with Luca. What kind of questions? The kind that assume I'm involved with him in ways beyond professional. Are you? Avery glanced at Luca, still sleeping, his face younger in repose. I don't know what we are. He's protecting me, helping me. And I trust him in a way that doesn't make sense given how recently we met. Trust or something else? Don't. Avery's voice was sharp. I'm pregnant and in the hospital fighting preterm labor. I don't have the energy for complicated feelings about complicated men. Fair enough. Simone squeezed her hand. But Avery? When you do have energy, you might want to examine those feelings. Because that man hasn't taken his eyes off you since I walked in, even while pretending to sleep. Avery looked, and sure enough, Luca's eyes were barely open, watchful and aware despite the appearance of rest. How long have you been awake? She asked. Long enough. He sat up, stretching carefully. I'll give you 2 privacy. You don't have to... Yes, I do. You need time with your friend. He stood, nodded politely to Simone. I'll be in the waiting room if you need anything. After he left, Simone let out a low whistle. Okay. I take back every skeptical thing I thought about this situation. That man is gone for you. He's not... We're not... Avery, I've known you for 6 years. I've seen you date exactly 3 people, none of whom you looked at the way you just looked at him. And none of whom looked at you like you were the only person in the room worth protecting. He's protecting me because I'm in danger. That's obligation, not... No. Simone's voice was firm. Obligation is hiring bodyguards. This is something else. He stayed all night in a hospital chair when he could have been anywhere. He fought off FBI agents to keep you from being stressed. He's looking at you like you matter beyond your usefulness to his legal strategy. Avery wanted to argue, but exhaustion was making her defenses crumble. Even if you're right, it doesn't matter. I'm pregnant with another man's baby. I'm about to testify in a federal investigation. My life is a disaster. Your life is complicated. That's different than disaster. Simone's expression softened. And maybe complicated is okay. Maybe perfect timing and simple situations are overrated. You sound like a greeting card. I sound like someone who wants her best friend to be happy. And if this Moretti guy makes you happy, he doesn't make me anything. He just... Avery struggled for words. He makes me feel less alone, and that scares me more than the men with guns. Why? Because alone is safe. Alone means I can't be disappointed when people leave. Simone was quiet for a moment. Then, is that why you stopped talking to Harper? Because she left for Seattle and you decided it was easier to cut her off than risk being hurt? The question landed like a punch. That's not fair. Maybe not. But is it true? Avery closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten again. I don't know. Maybe. Harper wanted me to slow down, enjoy life more, stop sacrificing everything for career advancement. And I thought she was being naive, that success required sacrifice. And now? Now I'm lying in a hospital bed at 24 weeks pregnant, fighting to keep my baby safe while testifying against organized crime. And I'm thinking maybe Harper was right. Maybe I sacrificed things that mattered more than I realized. It's not too late to call her, isn't it? We haven't spoken in over 2 years. I don't even know if she'd want to hear from me. Only one way to find out. Simone pulled out her phone. Give me her number. Simone, give me her number or I'll find it myself and tell her you're in the hospital. Your choice how much control you have over this conversation. Avery wanted to argue, but deep down she knew Simone was right. She'd been hiding from Harper the same way she'd been hiding her pregnancy from everyone. Out of fear, out of pride, out of the stubborn belief that admitting vulnerability meant admitting failure. She's not going to answer, Avery said, reciting the number from memory. Simone dialed, put it on speaker, and they waited through 4 rings before a familiar voice answered, cautious and surprised. "Hello? Harper?" Avery's voice cracked. "It's me." Silence stretched across the line, loaded with 2 years of unspoken hurt. Then, "Avery? What? Why are you calling?" "Because I'm in the hospital, and I'm scared, and I'm sorry. For everything, for the things I said, for cutting you out, for being too stubborn to admit I was wrong." More silence, then quieter. "What's wrong? Why are you in the hospital?" "I'm pregnant, 24 weeks. I went into preterm labor this morning, and they managed to stop it, but I'm on bed rest, and everything's complicated, and..." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know I don't have the right to call after all this time, but I needed you to know. Needed to hear your voice." "You're pregnant." Harper's tone was unreadable. "And you didn't tell me?" "I didn't tell anyone. I was planning to disappear, start over somewhere new where people didn't know me." That's the most Avery thing I've ever heard. But there was warmth underlying the exasperation. Always running instead of standing still long enough to let people help. "I know, you were right about that. About everything." "I wasn't right about everything. You're brilliant at what you do. I wanted you to have more than work. To let yourself be happy. I'm trying. It's harder than I thought." Harper laughed, and the sound was so familiar, it hurt. "Everything's harder than you think until you actually do it. That's life, Av. Messy and hard and worth it anyway." They talked for 20 minutes, words spilling out like water from a broken dam. Avery told her about the audit, the threats, Luca's protection. Harper told her about her life in Seattle, the design studio she'd opened, the boyfriend she was living with who made terrible coffee but excellent conversation. When they finally hung up with promises to talk again soon, Avery felt lighter than she had in years. "See," Simone said smugly, "not too late. Don't gloat." "I'm absolutely gloating. I'm a glorious, I told you so gloating machine." Despite everything, Avery laughed. And for the first time since the contractions had started, she let herself believe that maybe things would be okay. Not perfect, not simple, but survivable. With people who cared standing beside her. Luca returned an hour later after Simone had left with promises to visit again tomorrow. He looked different somehow. More settled, like the brief rest had restored some of the control he'd been missing. "Harper?" he asked, having clearly heard at least part of the conversation from the hallway. "My sister. We reconciled. Sort of." "Good. You need people." He sat back in his chair, resuming his vigil. "The FBI wants to schedule formal interviews. I told them we'd let them know when you're cleared by doctors." "And the prosecutors?" "Meetings on hold until you're stable. They understand the circumstances." Avery nodded, letting her eyes drift closed. The medication was making her drowsy, and exhaustion was pulling at her like gravity. "Luca?" she murmured. "Yeah?" "Thank you for being here. For everything." "You don't need to thank me." "I do, though, because you didn't have to do any of this, and you did anyway." She felt his hand cover hers, warm and solid, and let herself drift into sleep with that contact anchoring her to consciousness even as she slipped away from it. When she woke hours later to the sound of monitors and hushed voices, Luca was still there, still keeping watch, still choosing to stay when he could have left a dozen times. And Avery realized that Simone had been right. This was something more than obligation or strategy or protective instinct. This was someone who'd chosen to care, to invest, to stand beside her even when the storms kept coming. It terrified her, but it also felt like the first honest thing in her life in longer than she wanted to admit. 3 days in the hospital stretched into 5, then 7. The contractions stayed away, held at bay by medication and strict bed rest. But Dr. Martinez refused to release Avery until she was certain the immediate crisis had passed. Every morning brought the same routine: vital checks, ultrasounds, cautious optimism tempered by medical pragmatism. Luca stayed, not constantly, but enough that the nurses started greeting him by name, that he had a preferred chair, that someone had brought him changes of clothes that appeared in the small closet like evidence of roots taking hold. On the 8th day, Agent Morrison returned with a woman Avery didn't recognize. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of presence that announced authority without needing introduction. Ms. Cole, I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Chen. I understand you've been through a difficult time, but we need to move forward with formal proceedings. Luca stood from his usual chair, positioning himself protectively. She's still under medical observation. I'm aware. Dr. Martinez has cleared her for interviews as long as they're conducted here and kept brief. Sarah's expression softened marginally. I promise to be as efficient as possible. Avery shifted in the bed, reaching for the button that raised her into a sitting position. What do you need from me? Everything. Your audit findings, how you came to be staying at Mr. Moretti's estate, the threats against you, what you know about his father's criminal operations. Sarah pulled a recorder from her briefcase. With your permission, I'd like to record this. Before she says anything, Luca interjected, I want it clear that Ms. Cole is cooperating voluntarily. She's not under investigation. She's a witness who was threatened for doing her job. Agreed. Ms. Cole, you're here as a witness, not a suspect. Anything you tell me will be used to build cases against the Rossetti organization and other parties involved in the money laundering operations you've uncovered. Avery looked at Luca, who gave a slight nod. Permission or encouragement, she wasn't sure which. Okay, she said. Where do you want me to start? The interview lasted 2 hours. Sarah was relentless but professional, walking Avery through every detail of the audit, every suspicious transaction, every connection she'd traced through the labyrinth of shell companies and false invoicing. Agent Morrison took notes, while Sarah asked questions that revealed just how much they already knew and how much they'd been waiting for someone to confirm. Mediterranean Trade Solutions, Sarah said, pulling up a file on her tablet. You identified it as the primary vehicle for laundering money from 6 criminal organizations. Walk me through how you reached that conclusion. Avery explained the transaction patterns, the timing that suggested coordination, the way funds moved through the company without corresponding business activity. As she talked, she watched Sarah's expression shift from interested to satisfied. This corroborates intelligence we've had for years but couldn't prove, Sarah admitted. Your documentation is going to be crucial for prosecution. What about Luca? Avery asked. He inherited this system. He didn't build it. We're aware of Mr. Moretti's efforts to legitimize his operations. His cooperation will be taken into account. Sarah's gaze shifted to Luca. Which brings us to you. I need your formal statement and agreement to testify. I'll give you everything, Luca said. Complete access to my father's files, my testimony against everyone involved, cooperation throughout the investigation and trial. In exchange, I want immunity from prosecution for any crimes committed by the organization before I took control. That's a conversation for after I review the evidence. But preliminarily, if everything you're saying is accurate, I think we can reach an agreement. They spent another hour discussing logistics, grand jury testimony, trial preparation, witness protection if needed. Avery listened with growing unease as the scope became clear. This wasn't going to be quick or simple. This was years of her life committed to legal proceedings, to being the person who'd brought down a criminal empire. When Sarah and Morrison finally left, Avery felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. You okay? Luca asked quietly. I just committed to testifying in what sounds like a dozen different trials. So no, not really. You can still back out. Tell them you don't feel safe. You're too stressed. I can't. You know I can't. She looked at him, this man who'd somehow become the most constant presence in her life. We're in this now, both of us. Yeah, we are. The words hung heavy with implications neither seemed ready to examine. Before Avery could respond, her phone rang. Harper's name flashed on the screen. I should take this, she said. Luca nodded and stepped into the hallway, giving her privacy. Hey, Avery answered. Hey yourself, how are you feeling? Tired, overwhelmed, terrified I'm going to mess everything up. So, normal pregnancy emotions plus federal investigation stress. Sounds fun. Despite everything, Avery laughed. It's a unique experience. Listen, I've been thinking, when you get out of the hospital, you should come to Seattle. Stay with me for a while, get away from all the legal drama, and just focus on staying pregnant. The offer was tempting. Escape to somewhere safe and familiar. Let her sister take care of her the way family was supposed to. but the logistics crashed against the reality of her situation. I can't. I'm on strict bed rest, and the doctors want me close for monitoring. Plus, the FBI needs me available for interviews and preparation. Then I'm coming there. You shouldn't be alone through this. Harper, you have your studio, your life, which I can manage remotely for a few weeks. Avery, you almost lost the baby. You're facing down organized crime. You need family, and I'm it. Her voice softened. Let me help. Please. The word please did it. Harper never begged, never pushed when Avery's walls went up. The fact that she was pushing now meant this mattered, meant Avery mattered enough to fight for. Okay, Avery whispered. Yeah, that would be... I'd really like that. Good. I'll book a flight for tomorrow. Text me the hospital address, and I'll come straight there. After they hung up, Avery sat in the quiet room feeling something shift inside her. For years, she'd operated on the belief that independence meant not needing anyone, that strength was measured in how much you could carry alone. But lying here, surrounded by machines monitoring her baby's heartbeat, and legal battles that would define the next several years, she was starting to understand that maybe strength looked different than she'd thought. Maybe it looked like accepting help, like letting people care, like admitting that some burdens were too heavy to carry solo. Luca returned with 2 cups of tea and what looked like actual food from somewhere beyond the hospital cafeteria. Rosa sent provisions, he explained, unpacking containers of pasta and bread that smelled like comfort. She says hospital food is unacceptable for someone growing a baby. Rosa is a saint. She is. She also wants to know if you need anything else, clothes, books, someone to yell at the doctors if they're being difficult. Avery smiled despite herself. Tell her I'm okay, and that Harper is coming tomorrow. Your sister. Luca's expression shifted into something that might have been relief. That's good. You need people. You keep saying that, because it's true. He sat down, opening his own container of food. No one survives alone, not really. We just get better at pretending we don't need each other. Is that what you've been doing? Pretending. For years. Since my father died and I realized I was surrounded by people who wanted something from me but didn't actually know me. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. You're the first person in a long time who didn't want anything beyond honesty. I wanted your cooperation with the audit. That's business. I'm talking about personal. You never asked me for favors or connections, never tried to leverage our situation into something that benefited you. You mean besides living in your house and eating Rosa's cooking? That's protection, not leverage. There's a difference. Avery ate in silence, processing his words. He was right. She hadn't thought about what she could gain from proximity to someone powerful. She'd only thought about survival, about getting through each day without losing herself or her baby in the chaos. What happens after? She asked suddenly. After the trials and testimony, after everything's resolved, what do we do then? Luca set down his fork, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. I don't know. I guess it depends on what you want. What I want doesn't seem particularly relevant right now. I'm pregnant, essentially homeless since I can't go back to my apartment, and about to be unemployed when Carson and Associates realizes I'm never coming back. You're not homeless. You have a room at my estate for as long as you need it, and you won't be unemployed. Every federal agency and major corporation with fraud concerns will want to hire you after this. That's not the point. Then what is? Avery struggled to articulate the fear coiled in her chest. The point is that none of this was my plan. I was supposed to finish the audit, resign quietly, move somewhere new, and raise my baby in peaceful anonymity. Instead, I'm in the middle of a federal investigation, living with a man I barely know, letting people back into my life who I'd written off. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. Neither do I, Luca admitted. But we're doing it anyway. That's not reassuring. It's honest, which is more than most people offer. Before Avery could respond, alarms started blaring from the monitor beside her bed. Numbers flashed red, blood pressure spiking, heart rate climbing. She felt it before she saw it, the tightening across her abdomen, the familiar pressure that meant the contractions were back. No, she gasped. Not again. Luca was already at the door, shouting for nurses. Doctor. Martinez appeared within seconds, her calm competence a stark contrast to the chaos of beeping machines and urgent voices. How long? She asked, checking the monitors. Just started, Avery managed through clenched teeth. All right, we're going to increase the medication, see if we can stop them like last time. Dr. Martinez's hands were already moving, adjusting IVs, checking vitals. Try to stay calm, stress makes everything worse. But Avery couldn't stay calm. The contractions were stronger than before, coming faster, each one stealing her breath and replacing it with terror. 25 weeks now, still too early, still not safe. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't. Yes, you can. Luca was there, his hand gripping hers, his voice cutting through the panic. Breathe with me. In and out. You've got this. She focused on his voice, on the rhythm he set, letting it anchor her while her body betrayed her. The medication started working, slowly pushing back against the contractions, spacing them out from 2 minutes to 3 to 5. But they didn't stop completely this time. Dr. Martinez's expression grew more serious as she studied the monitors. The medication's helping, but not enough. We're going to need to be more aggressive with treatment. What does that mean? Avery asked. Magnesium sulfate. It's harder on you, makes you feel awful, honestly, but it's more effective at stopping preterm labor. She paused, choosing words carefully. If this doesn't work, we may be looking at delivery. 25 weeks is better than 24, but it's still extremely premature. The words landed like physical blows. Delivery. A baby born 3.5 months early. NICU. Machines and tubes, an impossible fragility. Do it, Avery said. Whatever you need to do. The magnesium made her feel exactly as terrible as promised. Flushed, nauseous, her whole body feeling wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. But gradually, agonizingly, the contractions slowed again. 6 minutes apart. 8. 10. Hours passed in a blur of monitoring and medication adjustments. Luca stayed the entire time, his presence the only constant in a situation that felt increasingly unstable. Somewhere around midnight, when the contractions had finally stopped and Avery was drifting in and out of medicated sleep, she heard Dr. Martinez talking quietly with Luca in the hallway. She's not going to make it to full term. Best case scenario, we buy another few weeks. Every day matters at this stage, but you both need to prepare for a premature delivery. How premature? If we can get to 30 weeks, 32, the outcomes improve significantly. But right now, I'd be grateful for 28. What can I do? Keep her calm. Keep stress minimal. And understand that sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, our bodies do what they're going to do. Luca must have returned to the room because Avery felt his hand cover hers again, warm and solid. I'm here, he murmured, not going anywhere. She wanted to tell him he didn't have to keep making that promise. That she understood this was too much to ask of anyone, let alone someone who'd known her for less than 3 weeks. But exhaustion pulled her under before the words could form. When she woke, early morning light was filtering through the windows and Harper was sitting in the chair beside her bed. Her sister looked older than Avery remembered, 30 now, with crow's feet around her eyes and silver threading through dark hair she'd inherited from their mother. You look terrible, Harper said fondly. You look like Seattle agreed with you. Seattle has good coffee and better people. You should visit sometime when you're not hospitalized. I'll add it to my list of things to do after testifying against organized crime and having a premature baby. Harper's smile faded. Avery, what the hell happened to you? When we talked last, you were an accountant with a boring job. Now you're in witness protection fighting to stay pregnant? It's a long story. I've got time, start talking. So Avery did. She told Harper everything. The audit, the parking garage, Luca's protection, the files that revealed decades of criminal activity. Her sister listened with the focused attention she brought to everything, asking occasional questions, but mostly just absorbing the impossibility of Avery's new reality. Okay, Harper said when Avery finished. First question, are you safe? As safe as I can be. Second question, is this Moretti guy someone you can trust? Avery thought about Luca staying through every crisis, protecting her without asking for anything in return, fighting federal agents and medical professionals to keep her stress minimal. Yeah, she said quietly. I think he is. Third question, are you in love with him? What? Number Harper, I'm pregnant with another man's baby. I've known Luca for 3 weeks. Love doesn't follow timelines, Av, and I've seen how you talk about him. That's not just gratitude or professional respect. It's complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. Harper leaned forward, her expression serious. I spent 2 years not talking to you because we were both too stubborn to admit we were wrong. Don't waste time on complications that don't actually matter. My pregnancy matters. The investigation matters. The fact that we're from completely different worlds matters. Does it? Or are those just excuses to avoid risking your heart? The question hit too close to truth Avery wasn't ready to examine. Before she could respond, Luca appeared in the doorway with coffee for Harper and tea for Avery. You must be Harper, he said, offering his hand. Luca Moretti. The infamous protector. Harper shook his hand, studying him with the assessing gaze of a younger sister determined to evaluate worthiness. My sister says you're trustworthy. I'm trying to be. Good. Because if you hurt her, witness protection won't save you from me. Luca's mouth quirked into an almost smile. Noted. He left them alone again, and Harper turned to Avery with raised eyebrows. Okay, I take it back. You're definitely in love with him. I'm not, Avery. He brought you tea without asking what kind you wanted. That means he's been paying attention to details about your preferences and habits. That's not casual concern. That's someone who cares about making you comfortable. Or someone who asks the nurses what I usually drink. You're impossible. I'm realistic. Even if I did have feelings for him, which I'm not saying I do, this isn't the time. I need to focus on staying pregnant and getting through the legal proceedings. And then what? And then I figure out how to be a single mother while rebuilding my career in a different city. Why different city? Because everyone here will know me as the accountant who testified against the mob. I'll never just be Avery Cole again. I'll always be the woman from the investigation. Harper was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe that's not the worst thing. Maybe being known for standing up and telling the truth is better than being invisible. I liked invisible. Invisible was safe. Invisible was lonely. There's a difference. Before Avery could argue, Dr. Martinez entered with news that shifted everything. The contractions have stopped completely, and your vitals are stable. I'm comfortable releasing you tomorrow with strict instructions. She pulled out a tablet, making notes as she talked. Absolute bed rest, no work, no stress, no activity beyond bathroom trips. Someone needs to be with you at all times to help with daily tasks. Weekly monitoring appointments, possibly more frequent if we see any concerning changes. I can do that, Avery said. Can you? Because compliance is crucial. One mistake, one moment of thinking you're feeling better and can do more, could trigger labor again. She won't be alone, Luca said from the doorway. She'll have round-the-clock care at my estate. Medical staff on call, whatever she needs. Dr. Martinez looked between them, clearly trying to navigate the complicated dynamics. And you are? Someone invested in keeping her and the baby safe. Family? Close enough. The doctor nodded slowly. All right, Ms. Cole, if you're comfortable with this arrangement, I'll prepare discharge papers for tomorrow. But I want to be very clear. This is your last warning. If you go into labor again, we likely won't be able to stop it. The next time could mean delivery. The weight of that statement settled over the room like snow. Final. Inescapable. I understand, Avery whispered. After Dr. Martinez left, Harper stood and gathered her things. I'm going to find a hotel nearby, but I'll be back tomorrow to help get you settled. You don't have to stay. I know you have work. I'm staying, at least for a few weeks. We already established this. Harper kissed her forehead. Rest. I'll see you tomorrow. When she was gone, Avery and Luca sat in silence, the reality of the next however many weeks pressing down on them both. You don't have to do this, Avery said finally. I can hire nurses, find a rental with accessibility. Stop. Luca's voice was gentle but firm. You're staying at the estate. Harper can visit whenever she wants. Rosa will make sure you eat properly. And I'll... He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. I'll make sure you're not facing this alone. Why? The question came out raw, honest. Why do you care this much? Luca was quiet for so long Avery thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because when I look at you, I see someone fighting for something real, not power or money or reputation, just the chance to bring a life into this world and give them better than what we had. He met her eyes. That matters. You matter. and I'm tired of living in a world where people only help each other when there's something to gain. The confession hung between them, honest and undefended. Avery felt something crack open in her chest, the careful walls she'd built against exactly this kind of vulnerability. I'm scared, she admitted, of the pregnancy, of the testimony, of whatever this is between us. Me too, Luca said, but I'm more scared of walking away and wondering what could have been. We barely know each other. Then we'll learn, one day at a time. It should have felt rushed, reckless, impossible. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing in Avery's carefully controlled life. The admission that sometimes you couldn't plan everything, couldn't protect yourself from every risk, couldn't avoid the terrifying possibility that letting someone in might actually be worth it. Okay, she whispered. One day at a time. Luca smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, less burdened by the weight of his father's legacy. Get some sleep, he said. Big day tomorrow. Moving you home. Home? The words settled into Avery's chest like warmth. Not her apartment that had never felt like more than temporary housing. Not her sister's place in Seattle, where she'd always be a guest. Luca's estate, where Rosa made tea without asking and security guards knew her by name, and someone had chosen to care whether she survived the chaos engulfing them both. It shouldn't feel like home after 3 weeks. But somehow, impossibly, it did. And maybe that was okay. Maybe Harper was right that love didn't follow timelines or logic. Maybe it just happened when two people decided the risk of connection was worth more than the safety of isolation. Avery closed her eyes, feeling exhaustion pull at her like gravity. Tomorrow she'd go home. Tomorrow she'd start the long, precarious journey of staying pregnant against her body's determination otherwise. Tomorrow she'd continue building a case that would reshape lives and dismantle empires. But tonight, she let herself rest. Let herself trust that someone else would keep watch, would notice if something went wrong, would be there when she woke. For someone who'd spent a decade proud of her independence, it should have felt like weakness. Instead, it felt like the bravest thing she'd ever done. The estate felt different when Avery returned, less like a safe house and more like somewhere she actually belonged. Rosa had transformed the guest room into something resembling a medical suite, complete with a hospital-grade bed that could be adjusted for comfort, monitors that tracked vital signs, and enough pillows to build a fortress. Too much? Rosa asked, hovering anxiously in the doorway. It's perfect, Avery said, and meant it. The care evident in every detail made her throat tight. Harper moved in 2 days later, claiming the room next to Avery's with the efficiency of someone determined to make herself useful. She set up her laptop and design equipment, taking calls with clients while keeping one ear tuned to any sound from Avery's room that might signal distress. The routine they established was simple but rigid. Avery stayed in bed except for bathroom trips and the daily shower Rosa insisted on helping with. Meals appeared on trays at precise intervals. Dr. Martinez's team came for weekly checkups that stretched into twice weekly, then 3 times when Avery hit 28 weeks and the contractions threatened again, but were caught early enough to manage with medication adjustments. Luca worked from home most days, his office door always open, his presence a constant awareness, even when he wasn't in the room. He'd appear at odd hours with books he thought she'd like, with updates on the federal investigation that was slowly building momentum, with conversation that had nothing to do with legal proceedings or pregnancy complications. Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with accounting, he said one afternoon, settling into the chair beside her bed. That's basically my entire personality. Try anyway. Avery thought about it, reaching back to a version of herself that existed before spreadsheets became her primary language. I wanted to be a dancer when I was 7, ballet specifically. My mother enrolled me in classes and I loved it. Loved the precision, the discipline, the way everything had rules and structure. What happened? I grew too tall too fast. By 12, I was 5'8" and still growing. My instructor gently suggested I might want to consider other interests. Avery smiled at the memory, bittersweet. I was devastated for about a week. Then I discovered that accounting had the same precision and structure, but nobody cared how tall you were. You replaced one rigid system with another. I liked rigid. Still do. It makes sense in a way that most things don't. Luca was quiet for a moment. The baby's going to ruin that for you. Nothing about parenting follows rules or structure. I know. It terrifies me. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. He stood, stretching. Harper's downstairs arguing with Rosa about dinner. Apparently your sister thinks Rosa's portions are too large. Harper thinks everyone's portions are too large. She survives on coffee and the artistic suffering of small meals. Rosa is appalled. Despite everything, Avery laughed. The sound felt foreign after weeks of medical tension and legal stress. Please tell me you're recording this. I'm considering selling tickets. He left, and Avery lay there feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Contentment, maybe. Or the beginning of it. The sense that despite the chaos and uncertainty, she was exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed, a text from Simone. Update? Avery typed back, still pregnant, still bored, still not allowed to do anything remotely interesting. Good. Boring is good. Interesting got you into this mess. Fair point. How's your brooding protector? Avery glanced toward the door where Luca had disappeared. Not brooding, concerned. Those are the same thing. Has he confessed his undying love yet? Simone. What? I'm living vicariously through your criminal romance drama. Let me have this. There's no romance, there's just proximity. Proximity in a mansion where he refuses to leave your side and fights everyone who tries to stress you. Super platonic. Avery set down the phone without responding because Simone was right, and she wasn't ready to examine exactly how right. The feelings growing between her and Luca were complicated by circumstances, by timing, by the baby that wasn't his, and the legal battles that defined their daily existence. But they were also simple in a way that scared her. She liked him, trusted him, looked forward to his presence in ways that had nothing to do with security and everything to do with the person he was when the walls came down. At 30 weeks, the FBI wanted her formal deposition for the grand jury proceedings. Sarah Chen arrived at the estate with a court reporter and enough recording equipment to document a presidential address. We're going to go through everything methodically, Sarah explained, setting up in Luca's study where Avery had been transported via wheelchair despite her protests. Your audit findings, the corporate structures you identified, the money laundering patterns. This testimony will be crucial for indictments against 17 individuals connected to the Rossetti organization. 17? Avery's eyes widened. Your work was thorough. We've been able to connect people we've suspected for years but couldn't prove. Sarah's expression softened slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but you're helping dismantle a criminal network that's operated for decades. The deposition lasted 6 hours with breaks every 90 minutes on Dr. Martinez's orders. Avery walked through transaction after transaction, shell company after shell company, watching Sarah and Agent Morrison take notes and exchange glances that suggested she was giving them exactly what they needed. Luca sat in the corner, present but silent, his face unreadable as Avery detailed his father's crimes with clinical precision. When it finally ended, Sarah packed up her equipment with barely contained satisfaction. This is excellent work, Ms. Cole. We'll have indictments within 2 weeks. And then? Then we prosecute. Trials will start next year, probably spring. We'll need you to testify, but we'll work around your medical situation and the baby. After they left, Luca finally spoke. You okay? I just spent 6 hours explaining how your father built a criminal empire. I should be asking you that question. I knew what he was. Hearing it documented just confirms what I've been trying to dismantle. He moved closer, his expression troubled. But I hated watching you carry that weight, having to be the one who explains it all. It's my job, was my job, whatever. It's more than a job now. You've made it your mission, and I'm not sure you've thought about the cost. The cost is worth it if it means those people face consequences. And if the cost is your peace, your ability to move on? Avery didn't have an answer for that. She'd been so focused on doing the right thing, on seeing this through, that she hadn't considered what came after. Whether she'd be able to build a normal life with the baby when everyone knew her as the woman who'd testified against organized crime. That night, contractions started again. Different this time, more insistent, less willing to be managed with medication. Dr. Martinez arrived within the hour, examining Avery with growing concern. 30 weeks and 4 days, she said, more to herself than anyone else. Better than we hoped, but still early. Can you stop it? Avery asked, fear making her voice small. I'm going to try. But Avery, you need to prepare yourself. This baby may be coming whether we're ready or not. The next 12 hours were a blur of medication adjustments and monitoring. The contractions would slow, then surge back stronger. Doctor. Martinez consulted with her team, brought in a neonatal specialist to discuss NICU protocols, prepared everyone for the possibility that this was it, the baby was coming. Luca stayed through all of it. Rosa brought food nobody ate. Harper held one hand while Luca held the other, both of them steady anchors while Avery's world contracted to the space between contractions, the numbers on monitors, the sound of a heartbeat that stayed strong despite everything. At dawn, something shifted. The contractions that had been building toward inevitability suddenly eased. The medication finally found the right balance. Dr. Martinez's expression transformed from concerned to cautiously optimistic. Well, she said, checking the monitors one more time, that was closer than I'd like, but I think we bought more time. How much time? Avery asked. Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. But every day matters. She sat on the edge of the bed, her expression serious. Avery, I need you to understand something. Your body is trying very hard to deliver this baby. We've managed to slow it down, but we may not be able to stop it next time. You need to make peace with the fact that your baby is likely going to be premature. How premature? If we can get to 34 weeks, I'll consider that a victory. 32 would be acceptable. Anything before that is riskier but survivable with proper NICU care. The words settled like weights. 34 weeks meant another month of this precarious existence, balanced on the edge of crisis. 32 meant 3 more weeks, and anything before that meant bringing a baby into the world before they were ready, trusting medical technology and the resilience of a child who hadn't chosen any of this. Okay, Avery whispered, then we aim for 34. Dr. Martinez smiled. That's the spirit. Now rest. Your body needs recovery time. After she left, Avery looked at Luca and Harper, both of whom looked exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. You two should sleep, she said. Not happening, Harper replied immediately. Harper, Avery, I watched you almost deliver a premature baby at 30 weeks. I'm not leaving this room until I'm convinced you're stable. I'm stable, the doctor said you bought time. That's not the same as stable. Harper's voice cracked slightly. I lost 2 years with you because we were both too stubborn to apologize. I'm not losing any more time. The raw honesty in her sister's voice made Avery's throat tight. I'm sorry. For those 2 years, for making you think you didn't matter. I'm sorry too, for judging your choices instead of supporting them. Harper squeezed her hand. We're both idiots. Let's try not being idiots anymore. Deal. Luca had been quiet through the exchange, but now he stood. I'll give you two some privacy, but I'm right next door if you need anything. After he left, Harper raised an eyebrow. He's in love with you. You know that, right? Harper, I'm serious. The way he looks at you, the way he's rearranged his entire life to make sure you're safe and comfortable. That's not obligation or guilt. That's love. Even if you're right, what am I supposed to do about it? I'm about to have another man's baby. I'm in the middle of a federal investigation. My life is chaos. So wait until it's less chaos. But don't pretend the feelings don't exist. Harper's expression softened. You deserve to be happy, Av. You deserve someone who sees you and chooses to stay. What if I'm not ready? Then you tell him that. But don't push him away because you're scared. Fear is a terrible reason to miss out on something good. Over the next week, the estate settled into a new rhythm. The crisis had passed, but left everyone hyper-aware, watching for signs that labor might start again. Avery hit 31 weeks, then 32. Each day felt like a victory and a reprieve. The indictments came down on a Tuesday. 17 people charged with money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. The news coverage was extensive. Major story about organized crime being dismantled through the testimony of a forensic accountant whose name was thankfully kept sealed in court documents. Luca watched the coverage with an expression Avery couldn't quite read. You okay? She asked. My father's legacy is being destroyed on national television. I should feel something about that. What do you feel? Relief. that it's finally ending, that I might actually get to build something legitimate without his shadow hanging over everything. He looked at her. And gratitude, that you cared enough about truth to risk everything for it. I didn't do it for gratitude. I know. You did it because it was right, which is exactly why it matters. That night, Luca made an announcement that shifted everything. I'm relocating the company to Northern California, fresh start, away from the East Coast networks that enabled everything my father built. That's a huge move, Avery said. It's necessary. The business here is too connected to the past. I need clean slate, new markets, people who know me for what I'm building instead of what I inherited. He paused. I was hoping you'd consider coming with me. As a consultant, help me build financial systems that are transparent and accountable from the ground up. Luca, I'm about to have a baby. I can't, not right away, but eventually, when you're ready, when the baby's stable and you've had time to recover and decide what you want. His eyes held hers. I'm not asking you to commit to anything beyond considering it, but I wanted you to know the offer stands. The possibility hung in the air between them, a future that looked nothing like the plans Avery had made but somehow felt more right than anything she'd imagined. At 34 weeks and 2 days, at 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning, Avery's water broke. This time, there was no stopping it, no medication that could reverse what had started. Dr. Martinez arrived with her team, converting the bedroom into a delivery suite with practiced efficiency. All right, she said, calm despite the urgency. We're having this baby today. 34 weeks is good, not ideal, but good. The NICU team is standing by. Fear and anticipation crashed over Avery in waves. This was happening. Ready or not, her baby was coming. I need Luca, she said suddenly. Harper started to protest. Avy, he's not the father. But Avery cut her off. I don't care. I need him here. Luca appeared in the doorway before anyone could call him, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I'm here, not going anywhere. The labor progressed quickly, too quickly, according to Dr. Martinez's muttered observations. 4 hours of contractions that built like waves, of breathing through pain that redefined her understanding of the word, of Harper holding one hand and Luca holding the other. At 7:34 a.m., with sunlight streaming through the windows and a medical team ready for any complication, Avery Cole delivered a daughter. The baby didn't cry immediately, and those 3 seconds of silence were the longest of Avery's life. Then a thin wail filled the room, and Dr. Martinez smiled. She's breathing on her own. That's excellent for 34 weeks. The neonatal team took over, assessing and monitoring, while Dr. Martinez finished with Avery. You did beautifully. She's small, just over 4 pounds, but she's a fighter. They brought her back after what felt like hours but was probably minutes. A tiny, wrinkled thing with dark hair and eyes that seemed too big for her face, perfect fingers and toes, lungs that worked, a heartbeat that was strong and steady. Hi, Avery whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hi, baby girl, I'm your mom. The baby's eyes focused on her with the vague awareness of newborns, and Avery felt something crack open in her chest. This was love. Immediate, overwhelming, terrifying love for a person she'd just met, but would die protecting. She needs a name, Harper said softly from the corner where she'd been crying quietly. Avery looked down at her daughter, at this impossibly small person who'd fought so hard to be here. Lily. Her name is Lily. It's perfect, Luca said, and when Avery looked up, she saw tears on his face too. The NICU team wanted to take Lily for monitoring, standard protocol for premature babies. Avery let them, even though every instinct screamed to hold on, to never let her daughter out of sight. She'll be fine, Dr. Martinez assured her. 34 weeks with no respiratory distress is better than we could have hoped. She'll probably need a few weeks in the NICU for feeding support and growth, but the prognosis is excellent. After the medical team cleared out and Avery had been cleaned up and settled, Luca approached the bed with an expression that was carefully neutral. Congratulations, he said. She's beautiful. Thank you for being here, for everything. Avery reached for his hand. I know this wasn't what you signed up for when you offered me protection. No, It was better. He squeezed her hand gently. I need to tell you something before the adrenaline wears off and I lose my nerve. Okay. I'm in love with you. The words came out steady, certain. I know the timing is terrible. I know you just had a baby, that you're dealing with recovery, and NICU, visits, and eventual testimony. I know you didn't plan for any of this, least of all feelings for someone like me. Luca, let me finish. I'm in love with you, but I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm not asking you to make any decisions or commitments. I just needed you to know. Because in about 3 hours, I'm flying to California to handle the business relocation, and I didn't want to leave without being honest. Avery's heart was hammering. You're leaving? Just for 2 weeks. Getting the new office set up, meeting with local contractors and suppliers. Then I'm coming back, and we'll figure out the next steps together. If you want me involved, if you want... He stopped, vulnerability written across his face. If you want anything with me at all. She should have been overwhelmed. Should have been focused entirely on Lily, on recovery, on the 1,000 practical considerations of premature motherhood. But sitting there, looking at Luca's face, she realized Harper had been right about fear being a terrible reason to miss something good. I want you involved, she said quietly, not just with the business consulting, with everything, with me and Lily, with building whatever this is between us. Even though it's complicated? Especially because it's complicated. Because you chose to stay when complicated would have been the perfect excuse to leave. Relief and joy transformed his expression. When I get back from California, we'll talk, really talk, about what we want, where this goes. And if I'm not ready for all the answers yet, then we figure it out as we go, one day at a time, like we've been doing all along. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. Then he was gone, leaving her with Harper, and the quiet knowledge that everything had changed. The next 2 weeks were a blur of NICU visits and pumping breast milk and learning to function on 3 hours of sleep. Lily progressed steadily, gaining weight, learning to feed, proving herself to be exactly as much a fighter as Dr. Martinez had predicted. Harper stayed, helping with everything from diaper changes to navigating the confusing world of premature infant care. Simone visited daily, bringing coffee and conversation, and the reminder that Avery had people beyond just family. On the 14th day, the NICU team cleared Lily for discharge. 4 pounds, 12 ounces of determined baby who decided she was ready to go home. Luca arrived that afternoon, walking into the estate's living room where Avery sat with Lily sleeping against her chest. Hey, he said softly. Hey, yourself. How was California? Productive. The new office is set up, we've hired local staff, everything's ready for the full transition. He sat beside her, looking at Lily with an expression of wonder. She's gotten bigger. Almost 5 pounds now. The doctors are amazed at how quickly she's catching up. She takes after her mother, stubborn and determined. Avery smiled. I prefer to think of it as persistent and goal-oriented. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lily sleep, and Avery felt pieces of her life clicking into place. Not the life she'd planned, but something better. Messier, more complicated, infinitely more real. I've been thinking, Luca said eventually, about the California move, about what comes next. And I want you to come with me, you and Lily, not as my employee or my consultant, as my partner, in business and everything else. Luca, that's a lot. I know. But I've spent 5 years dismantling my father's legacy and trying to build something better. And I realized something while I was in California setting up the new office. He turned to face her fully. I don't want to build it alone. I want to build it with you. Someone who understands accountability and integrity. Someone who won't let me take shortcuts or compromise on what's right. What about the investigation? The trials? We'll handle them. Fly back when needed. Work with prosecutors remotely when possible. Sarah says most of your testimony can be done via video conference given your situation. Avery looked down at Lily, at the daughter who'd already survived so much in her short life. Then she looked at Luca, at the man who'd protected them both without asking for anything in return. Okay, she said. Yes, we'll come with you. The smile that broke across his face was brilliant. Yeah? Yeah, on one condition. Anything. You let me finish my audit. Properly document everything, create a clean baseline for the new company. I need to know that what we're building is completely separate from what your father created. Deal. Though I should warn you, Rosa's already planning the move. She's packed half the kitchen. Rosa's coming too? She wouldn't hear of staying behind, said someone needs to make sure you eat properly and Lily grows strong. Despite herself, Avery laughed. Your household staff is more loyal than most families. They're not staff, they're family, and so are you, if you'll let us be. Before Avery could respond, Lily stirred and made a small sound of protest. Luca reached out instinctively, his hand cradling her tiny head with surprising gentleness. Can I? He asked. Of course. He lifted Lily carefully, supporting her head and body like he'd done this before. The baby settled against his chest, her small hand curling around his finger. Hi, Lily, he murmured. I'm Luca. I'm not your biological father, but I'm going to love you like I am. I'm going to protect you and your mom. I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing what real integrity looks like, what it means to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Avery's throat went tight watching them together. This wasn't the family she'd planned, but it was the family she had. Chosen, complicated, completely real. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in Northern California, Avery stood in the new company headquarters with Lily strapped to her chest in a carrier. The office was all glass and light, designed to represent transparency in every sense of the word. What do you think? Luca asked, coming to stand beside her. I think it's perfect. Clean slate, fresh start. Just like we planned. The trials back east were progressing. Avery had testified twice via video conference, with Lily napping peacefully through most of her second appearance. The prosecutors were building solid cases, and Sarah predicted convictions across the board. The Rossetti family had made one last attempt at intimidation, a threatening letter that arrived at the estate 2 weeks after Lily's birth. Luca had turned it over to the FBI immediately, and 3 men were arrested within days. After that, the threats stopped. Either they'd given up, or they'd realized that Avery Cole wasn't backing down. Harper had moved to California too, opening a design studio in San Francisco and visiting every weekend. She and Rosa had developed an unlikely friendship based on mutual appreciation for good food and blunt honesty. Simone had taken a job at a firm in Oakland, claiming the move had nothing to do with wanting to be near Avery, but everything to do with better weather and tech industry clients. The life Avery had built in 6 months looked nothing like the solitary existence she'd planned. It was louder, messier, filled with people who insisted on mattering, and it was exactly what she needed. I have something for you, Luca said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Avery's heart jumped. Luca, it's not what you think. Or maybe it is, but not yet. He opened the box to reveal a key. Official key to the office. You're a full partner now, equal say in everything we build. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. This company is as much yours as mine. You're the one who helped me understand what real accountability looks like. He pressed the key into her hand. Besides, Lily needs to grow up watching her mother run a business empire built on integrity. Avery looked down at her daughter, who was staring up at her with eyes that were starting to focus more clearly every day. She's going to grow up knowing her mother stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. And that her father... Luca stopped, uncertain. Yes? Avery prompted, heart racing. I know I'm not her biological father, but I'd like to be her father in the ways that matter. If you'll let me. Tears blurred Avery's vision. Luca, you've been her father since the day she was born. Biology doesn't change that. He pulled them both into an embrace, careful of Lily between them. I love you. Both of you. I want to build this life together. Officially, permanently. Is this a proposal? It's a promise. That I'm here, that I'm staying, that you're not alone in any of this. He pulled back slightly to look at her. The actual proposal will come when I can do it properly. Probably when Lily's old enough to help plan it. Avery laughed through her tears. She's 6 months old. Then we have time to get it right. They stood there in the empty office that represented new beginnings, holding each other and the daughter who'd brought them together in the most unexpected way. Outside, California sunshine streamed through the windows. In the distance, the city sprawled with all its complicated possibility. Avery had spent years believing that control meant planning every detail, that strength meant not needing anyone, that safety came from keeping people at arm's length. She'd been wrong about all of it. Real strength was admitting when you needed help. Real control was knowing when to let go and trust someone else. Real safety wasn't isolation. It was letting people in and believing they'd stay. Lily made a small sound, and both Avery and Luca looked down at her. She was watching them with that intense baby focus, like she understood exactly how important this moment was. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Avery murmured. "Ready to help your mom and Luca build something good?" Lily's response was to grab Luca's finger again and hold on tight. "I think that's a yes," Luca said, his voice rough with emotion. And there, in an office built on transparency and second chances, surrounded by sunshine and the people who'd chosen to be family, Avery Cole finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a plan, but people who saw you completely and chose to stay anyway. She'd started this journey alone, pregnant and terrified, hiding from everyone who might judge her choices. She'd ended it surrounded by love, messy, complicated, absolutely real love that didn't require her to be perfect, only honest. The audit that had started everything was complete, filed away as evidence that would help prosecute dozens of criminals. But more than that, it had led her here. To a man who'd proven that integrity mattered more than legacy. To a sister who'd forgiven and shown up when it mattered most. To friends who'd rearranged their lives to be present. To a daughter who'd fought to be born and was growing stronger every day. The future still held uncertainty, more trials, more testimony, the challenge of raising a child while building a business. But Avery wasn't afraid anymore, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. You didn't have to face the hard things alone. Sometimes the most powerful transformations didn't happen in balance sheets or courtrooms. They happened when you stopped hiding and let someone stand beside you. And that was worth more than any perfectly executed plan could ever be.